Hi everybody and welcome to my kitchen. If you're like me and you live in an apartment or maybe a house and you don't own a smoker, you don't want to invest in one, perhaps you'd like to have a nice pulled pork sandwich or something like that, and you don't have a way to smoke it or a way to really recreate that tender, juicy, smoky flavored barbecue that you'd like to have. So today what we're going to do is we're going to smoke this bone-in shoulder blade roast, which is about 2.5 pounds, and which is perfect for 2 people, or maybe 3 or 4 if you're light eaters. So what we're going to do is start off with some pretty simple seasoning. I know if you've seen a lot of cooking shows, they have a lot of fancy rubs and things like that. From my experience smoking on a real smoker, all you really need is decent seasoning and the smoke and the right amount of time to make the meat tender. So what I usually go with is a little bit of kosher salt first, and just make sure you get a good coating on there. And you don't have to put too much. You can always season later too, but try to cover it, get a good covering. I'm not measuring obviously. But enough to cover it. And I like to use the kosher salt again because you can see how much salt you're putting on. Fresh ground black pepper, again just to cover it. That looks about right. And then we're going to use some granulated garlic. I prefer granulated garlic over garlic powder. I feel like it has a better flavor. A more realistic garlic flavor, whereas garlic powder tends to have, I don't know, sort of a chemically flavor that I don't like. But it's up to you. You could use garlic powder too. This is New Mexico chili powder. So you can see I'm not applying it really evenly because it doesn't really matter. Because once we've applied it, we're going to spread it all in. I like New Mexico chili powder because it's got kind of a nutty flavor. It's not hot, and it'll give the meat a nice color. And then all we're going to do is repeat on the other side. And there we go, we're going to rub that in again. So now we have 2 sides of our roast seasoned. And again, if you want to follow some sort of a dry rub recipe, that's totally up to you. I like to try and keep things simple. And there we go, we're ready to start smoking. Now believe it or not, this is what we're going to use to smoke our pork. It is a Cameron's stovetop smoker. It's made out of stainless steel, and they're about $50 online. Look them up on Amazon or eBay, what have you. But it's all stainless steel, and it has a lid that slides off, and it reveals a cooking rack right here, and a drip tray. And so what you do is take everything out, and that's the base of the smoker. And then what you're going to do is you take your Cameron's wood chips. They also sell them online, and they're specifically designed for this smoker. They're very, very fine. So they can smoke quickly, and they recommend about a tablespoon for 1 hour of cooking. And sometimes I go with a mix of different woods like hickory and oak, because I'm not going to be smoking this very long and it is pork. I'm just going with straight hickory this time. So you put that little pile of wood chips right there in the middle, spread those out so the so the drip tray can fit nice and level. And actually, that'll help those chips go off a little bit faster. And then we'll go ahead and put our rack back in. And we put our pork roast right on top, just like that. Take our lid, slide it back on, and now we're ready to start smoking. Now Cameron's recommends that you put the smoker over a burner on medium heat. This is one of those glass top stoves that I'm not very fond of, but I live in an apartment and that's what I'm dealing with right now. So I'm going to use this burner here, which is a medium-sized burner, and I'm trying to put that right over it. Now the reason I'm turning this around is because I want to have this opening directly in line with the vent hood. And I should mention here that although this is designed for stovetop smoking in your house, you really should have a vent hood that goes outside, not one of those ones where you have a microwave over your stove or something like that and it just draws it in and then spits it out through a filter of some kind, because you will get a lot of smoke smell in your house and you might set off your fire alarm. I don't know. I've got a pretty good vent hood here, thankfully, so I don't have that as a concern. But what I want to do is have this over the middle of the burner and this opening right above the vent hood. We're going to go ahead and put this on. Medium heat, which is what Cameron recommends, and I found works well. And we're just going to wait until you start seeing little wisps of smoke start coming out of here, and then we're on to the next step. Now, as you'll notice, I left the front of this open a little bit more than the rear, and that's because I want that smoke to go up to my vent hood. And another little trick that I use is I make a sort of informal guide for the smoke to direct it up into the fan. And that's important because it's going to stop the smoke from spreading on the other side of the smoker and filling your house up with a smoke aroma. It's not very much, but it is something. So as you can see, not terribly fancy. I weighed it down with a couple of little stones that you can get at liquor stores, or you could tape it if you wanted to, but that might get sticky. Anyhow, just it'll even stand up on its own if you use your own design. And then we'll go ahead and put the fan on full. You can see that the smoke is going right up into the vent hood, which is directly above it. And so now we'll go ahead and turn on our vent hood. You're going to want to put that baby on full blast. Keep as little smoke as possible from going into your house. Hopefully you can see that smoke. It's going up directly into our vent hood. That's what we want to see. Your house will still smell a little bit like smoke when you're done, but it'll smell more like bacon, so that's not bad. And more importantly, you're not going to set off any smoke alarms. Okay, so our pork roast has been smoking for about 1 hour, which is about as long as those wood chips will last. Towards the end of the smoking, you'll still see a lot of vapor coming out, and you might think, oh, it's still smoking. But in reality, the smoke has started to turn to steam because the meat inside the smoker is hitting about close to 350 degrees by Cameron's estimation, and I think that's about right. But now we can go ahead and slide this thing open, and you can see we're getting steam out of there, not smoke. And our roast looks pretty good. It's got a little bit of a smoky color on it. Now, I should mention here that you're not going to get the exact same effect from smoking on this as you would on a real smoker, because on a real smoker you'd probably go 2 hours or maybe more depending on the size of the roast, and you would be cooking it through with the smoke. Here we're just applying the smoke flavor to the meat, and then we're going to finish cooking it in the oven. But as you can see, it's got a little bit of a smoky color. It's shrunk down a little bit, and what we're going to let that do now is cool down. Then we're going to pull the tray out, get rid of the old wood chips, and put it in the oven. Okay, so we've taken the roast out of the main body of the smoker and cleaned out all of the old wood chips. It may not be a necessary step, but my concern is that the used wood chips might impart a bitter flavor to the meat. So I empty those out before I go ahead with the next step, which is to take our roast, which is still steaming hot, and we're going to go ahead and put it back in here. And we're not going to put the lid on. We're just going to cover it nice and tight with some aluminum foil. And seal the edges really good. That's probably about right. Yeah, let's go ahead and seal that nice and tight. Make sure the edges are covered. And there we go. That should work pretty good. Now, this has been cooking for about an hour at 350, as I mentioned earlier, in the Cameron smoker. So it's already had a little bit of time to cook. So what we're going to do is put it in a 250 degree oven for about 2 hours. And then we'll pull it out and see what we got, but 2 hours at 250 should be just about right. Alright, so we actually ended up letting this roast go for 2.5 hours. I pulled it out at 2 hours and checked the edge that seemed the firmest, which was over here, and it wasn't quite where I wanted it, so I put it in for another 30 minutes. One of the cardinal rules of barbecue is that you can't rush it, and even though this isn't traditional barbecue, the same rules apply. So if you're telling your dinner guests or guest that you're going to have barbecue ready at 6 o'clock, it's not ready at 6 o'clock, then you change the plans to 7 o'clock. You don't choose to serve barbecue that isn't quite done yet. On the other hand, you can start early, and if it's done early, you can let it sit in the pan with a little bit of foil on it, and it'll be nice. You really can't overcook it unless you just let it dry out. But if you put it in the pan, keep foil on it, keep it warm, it'll be fine, even if it's done early. So just keep that in mind. So now that we've left it in for another half hour, this is why they call it pulled pork. You just take a fork and pull it, and look how easily that comes apart. Another good indicator that it's done is you can see here that the bone is pulling away from the meat, and you can actually just pull it out, just like that. And that's when you really know that the barbecue is done. So then you just go ahead and continue to shred this up. Some people like to do it really, really fine. I like it to be a little bit chunky, but you get the idea. And you just continue on working through and pulling this apart. And now the moment of truth. This is all about the pork, so the bun really isn't all that important. In fact, the more simple it is, the better it is. Pile that pork on there high, like that. Get some of those crusty bits on there, like that. Be generous, because that's how they do it down south. Oh, that little piece fell off. There we go. And then it's time for the barbecue sauce. Now, in the South, when they do barbecue, they don't cook the meat in the barbecue sauce like some places that call themselves barbecue places, especially on the West Coast. They let the meat do the talking. So once the meat's cooked, then they put the barbecue sauce on. You can use any barbecue sauce that you like. Store-bought, your favorite store-bought is fine. I prefer to make my own. This is a recipe that comes from Neely's Barbecue in Memphis, Tennessee. And that was really the first place that really inspired me to cook authentic barbecue, even though we're doing it here in an apartment, but as close to being authentic as we can. And you can find this recipe online, Food Network. I'll put a link here in the video. But that's what you're looking for. Put a lot of sauce on there. Let it get in there. There's also two schools of thought with barbecue. One is that you have just the pork and the sauce with coleslaw on the side, or you put the coleslaw on the sandwich. I'm a pork only guy. I'm kind of a purist, so that's the way I like to roll. But by all means, if you have a favorite coleslaw recipe or a favorite store-bought coleslaw, go ahead and pile it on there. Have it with some macaroni and cheese or some baked beans, and you've got yourself a pretty good barbecue meal. Hopefully you liked what you saw today. If you did, I hope that you'll subscribe to the channel. There's going to be more simple meals coming up in the future for you and a friend or two. Thanks for watching.